The story goes, I was visiting the Greensboro Museum of Art in North Carolina and trying to think about writing an ekphrastic poem. And the docent gave me a backstory for this sculpture that involved a pregnant woman with a chainsaw. And this is the poem that resulted. Her tin skin. I want her tin skin. I want her militant Barbie breast, resistant, cupped, no, cocked in the V of her elbow. I want my curves mountainous and locked. I want her arabesque eyes. I want her tar markings, her curlicues. I want her tin skin. She is a tree, her hair a forest of strength. I want to be adorned with bottles. I want my brownness to cover all but the silver edges of my tin skin. My sculptor should have made me like her round-bellied maker hewed her, with chainsaw in hand, roughly. Cut away from me everything but the semblance of tinder. Let nothing but my flexed foot, towing childhood, tell the night-eyed who know how to look what lies within.
So I think there's no greater treat than to be an artist and have their art seen through someone else's eyes as eloquently as that. And it just kind of shows me how the work kind of lives beyond, and I think your poems as well live beyond kind of your intentions and your ideas, exactly. And how they kind of have their own life. I mean, I love that you addressed her as this entity outside of me, outside of the art world. And,
yeah, she's alive. She's alive for the viewer, and was alive to me in a moment when I felt vulnerable for different reasons. And she seemed to be this emblem of strength. I knew the Saar name already when I encountered your work for the first time, and it was I think of it. The poems as often coming from someplace else. And I like the way you're talking about the work circulating, because in that sense, the someplace else is up here, but it's also right here.
Right. Well, so I was at Vermont Studio Center, and Evie was the poet in resident. And, I'm embarrassed to say I was not familiar with her work beforehand.
Please.
But when she read it, it was just like, and her other works out of The New Black was the book she was reading out of. Just, of course, instant love affair. So we have since then, maybe that was, 4 years ago?
About 4 years ago, yeah.
Have had a few opportunities to collaborate, which we will share with you all today.
Yeah.
So
we find that we're thinking on similar wavelengths a lot. And what was exciting for me, other than just meeting Alison Saar, for me that was a fangirl moment. It was, sort of getting to hear about your process, how you were thinking about things, and I don't know if it was already at that moment or in the email exchanges that followed, I began to hear about Breach, that you were working on this exhibition that was thinking about the Mississippi and the flooding and what that had meant. And this was something I was already thinking about because I teach poems by Sterling Brown and others who are thinking about Bessie Smith and Backwater Blues.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of think, so Breach was the exhibition that was an extension of the last show I had here, which was Silt, Soot, and Smut a couple of years ago. Hope some of you were able to catch that. So, and then that went to Lafayette College and then traveled around for a couple of years and actually just came back this fall. But I think, because you had also been working a lot with poets and even in your own work, thinking about nature.
Yes.
And Black writers, Black fiction writers looking at nature. And so I thought that was also a really interesting overlap. And we soon learned that we had many overlaps. And we're still learning.
Yes. And hopefully that will continue.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then, so we had this breach connection, and that actually came from, Christina had mentioned my residency at the Joan Mitchell Foundation, which is in New Orleans. And when I was there, I was really kind of like blown away how there were all these promises after Katrina that these things are going to be resolved, and New Orleans was going to be better than ever, and all these flaws and areas where New Orleans had failed its citizens were going to be repaired and restored, and we have since seen that that has not happened. There's been many betrayals since then, and so I kind of did this body of work responding to that. And then when I was at Lafayette College, they have a really amazing press, and I wanted to I had been working with them on some print ideas, but they said, oh, we can also have a letterpress and we can do a book. So I said, I know just the person I want to call up to come on down, an hour's drive, maybe a little more, down to Lafayette from Rutgers, and we came up with this great collaboration. And so I think, it's interesting for me, and you should kind of express your own opinion on that the nature of collaboration, I think, between artists and writers or whoever is that everyone feels comfortable in their own space, and that one person isn't dictating the other, so it doesn't become an illustration of someone else's idea. And I think because we have such a similar interest and we find a convergence of our wavelength of ideas, that it was an easy thing. Well, easy for me. I don't know how easy it was for you. Okay.
Oh, I mean, Alison is the most wonderful person to work with because, I mean, in this case, the project that became Mami Wata, I mean, she was inviting me into her space, and I have collaborated with artists in a less integrated way on broadsides and that sort of thing, but to be able to come in and work on an artist's book, something that to my excitement became three-dimensional and really sort of manifested itself fully as an artwork, but have my words understood to be visual and yet textual, and have all of those pieces balanced and reflected and reinforcing each other. That was a really powerful experience for me.
Yeah,
so
we had fun because they have a pretty nice collection of old wood typeset. So you're just pulling out all the drawers. I'm sure someone was pulling their hair out, thinking of putting it all back in where it's supposed to go, right? But we just like pulled stuff out and really played with it. And so so this is the kind of how you would see the book outside. So as she mentioned, it's a three-dimensional book. It's basically cigar boxes that were kind of repurposed into these little windows. And so this is one of the poems that's pouring out of her mouth.
Yeah, so I'm reading, the poem itself is called Mami Wata, or How to Know a Goddess When You See One. And it's in 3 parts, but because this is the way you meet the book, with poem section 2 spewing out of her mouth like that on fabric. How wonderful. I thought I'd start with this section. So it's called Mami Speaks. You make me with wood and the fear-sharpened knife's edge. You make me with paint and awe. You carve me with snakes, spotted and diamond-backed. You wrap me in their tails or give me my own. You make me a ritual figure. I am the second story of your masks. You make me with fabric and fiber, with pigment, braid, and thread. You make me with myth, fantasy, and affection. You make me with dread and dreads. You shape me from copper, cut me from patterned tin. You make me with borrowed cultures, with local need. You make me your tormentor and deliverer. I am the demon goddess of your home's floral and perfumed altar. I am the irresistible thief who flashes and fills your eyes with my full breasts before I rob you blind. You make me powerful as tides with rushing rivers of hair. You flood me with mystery and desire. So no wonder I do what you have given me to do.
You need to show them. I don't know if you can see it on that, but so she's got her little shimmy hips and then ends up in the fantail.
The mermaid's tail.
Yeah, Mami Wada. I should say Mami Wada is a deity, transatlantic deity that comes to us from Africa, and she is often in the rivers, but also is having crossed the ocean, can also represent the ocean. And she's also often represented as a siren or a mermaid, and so we thought it fitting that we put some tail on it.
Right? Maybe that's a good segue to the next part of the poem. I mean, what was wonderful was getting a chance to sort of research her figure along with the Mississippi Delta, alongside Alison, and there was what was the name of the book that you referred me to with including your Mami Wata figure? Oh,
it was just on Mami Wata. It was from the Fowler?
Yes, right, exactly.
That, Henry Druell had curated the show, right.
So reading about her, I didn't want to write a poem that was a factual history, but a kind of cultural history or a riff on that. And so this first section of the poem is a short one called A Deity's History. If you show your tail, I'll spank it, the mamas would say to the daughters. Meaning, keep your behind you. Meaning, ass backwards is the wrong direction. Later, this threatened showing called up Negro chaps in Paris, uniformed, fighting World War II area stereotypes. Now tales speak of grown-ass women who catch the secrets of fish, whose bare blue breasts hint at the source of their power, stirring beneath the water. And I liked being able to connect Mami Wata as a figure that sometimes gets a tale attributed to her to the ways that the story is that African American soldiers in Paris would be asked, to show their tales because of the ways that racism had traveled to that place and time. So why do we need a figure like Mami Wata, and what does she do?
Right. And so this depiction of Mami Wata is basically that lines traced across her back is the Mississippi watershed. So it's a map of the Mississippi watershed coming down her spine and being courted by catfish.
She's such an amazing figure, and such a part of what makes her amazing, I'll say, is the way she has traveled, and that got us thinking about sort of travel within the U.S. as well. The Mississippi comes down, but the migrants, as we all know, from the early 20th century, travel up, and that was part of what led me to the way the third section of the poem unfolds. So I'll read that one for you now, and it's called Migrants Prayer. Is that you, Mami, wrapped in that soft white fleece, casting that cold, hard glance in all directions? Is that your spray swirling, stinging in the bitter wind, your blue bosom glittering with diamonds thick as ice flows? I recognize your excess in this, your muscle, but miss the wildness of your free, rushing mirror gray, green, golden, muddy into every crevice, trailing delta silt in cool, deadly fingers as long as your nom de guerre, Mississippi, over every surface, swallowing what you will, miss, fear, yearn to possess. So, that's one.
So actually because we're on opposite coasts, right. I think we met once at
EPI.
Well, but before that, I think our first meeting was Grand Central Station.
That's right.
You were coming in out of town, or I was going out, or something like that. So it's always, again, kind of being these very transient figures, trying to get this collaboration going. And I remember you had the first two together, And there was a bit of a pause before the last section came. And I'm like, oh, what's happening? And she said, yeah, I'm just kind of like, because it was the dead of winter. And I think because things weren't flowing, both literally
unintended.
And so I love that how she then started seeing Mami Wata in her other forms, as ice and as snow, to become the river. And I just thought, oh, that is so perfect and so beautiful. And when you get a chance to go upstairs, we have some of the prints you can look at, but we did it, the letterpress without ink. Right. And so it's really difficult to see the text. Unfortunately, that's why we put all the words in the colophon, because sometimes our great ideas made it difficult to actually physically read them. But
you can feel the words.
You can feel the words, that she's there and she's embedded in the paper, and that you have to really look to see her in all of her different manifestations.
Exactly. It's a really beautiful set of collections and or set of pieces that go in the three-dimensional book. One is rolled up as a scroll, one is folded and has a peel-up layer. They're different color inks. It was wonderful for me to feel the words become, textual and textural in that way.
Well, I also think because so much of this history, and I say history because it's very much in the present, in terms of these deities being in the Americas, and is masqueraded and masked. And so I like the idea that you had to lift up layers to see things and discover things underneath other layers. And the last component of the book is these three sort of separate prints that we took lines out of each of the poems. And they're printed on water-soluble paper. So they're basically like break glass when necessary. If you need Mami Wata, you put it in the river and it dissolves as an offering, so you have to sacrifice the print.
Yeah. Once it's gone, it's gone.
But what's great about this paper is the words will break up and they'll float around, and then the letters will break apart from the words, and then slowly the image and everything dissolves and just becomes liquid.
Or so they say, because I still have not dissolved mine.
Yours. No, we had a couple of tests in some bathtubs. It does work.
I believe you. I just have not made the sacrifice yet.
Okay, well, when necessary. Only when necessary.
Yes.
So that brings us to the present, yes?
Towards the present, yes. So having been invited into Alison's sort of breach exhibit, or silk smut?
Soot and smut.
Soot and smut, right? Different incarnations. When I began working to put together the book that became Semi-Automatic, she was on my mind. And I guess what I want to do is maybe begin by sort of introducing Semi-Automatic to you all. If Mami Wata is this very sexualized and sort of powerfully female energied figure, that is an energy that continues and flows through this book in certain ways. The poems I'm going to share with you sort of pick up that thread. But Semi-Automatic as a whole was written, really out of a feeling of political despair. The Trayvon Martin era was taking its toll on me, or I should say is taking its toll on me. But this book was born out of a sense of wanting to register the kind of violence that was permeating everything for me, not only police brutality and those kinds of violences, Black deaths in a Black Lives Matter moment, but violence that we do to the earth, violence that affects women in particular, or immigrants, violence of war, just so many different things were weighing on me as part of a similar or interrelated set of forces. The book was a way of registering those and pointing to art as a way of breaking that cycle of violence. And when I think about the cycle of violence, I'm thinking not only about the acts, but about our responses. The outrage, the mourning, the grief, the violence, the outrage, the mourning, the grief. So this book was intervening in all of that.
Can you show them the cover first?
Yes.
This is a beautiful Norman Lewis, right?
Yeah.
Painting. And I think it lets you know what you're in for beyond the cover of the book, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Like,
I think the painting is called Confrontation. Yeah, that's the name of the piece. So one of the poems that I'd like to share from this collection, is that my mic? Oh, okay, no worries. As long as I don't need to. One of the poems I'd like to share from the book to sort of continue with this thread is thinking about the young woman in McKinney, Texas. Does that ring a bell for anybody? Hopefully the poem will bring this incident back for you all. So the epigraph is McKinney, Texas, June 2015. And the poem is called What's Not to Liken. The 14-year-old girl was treated like A, a grown woman, B, a grown man. The bikini-clad girl was handled by the cop like A, a prostitute, B, a prostitute by her pimp. The girl was slung to the ground like A, a sack of garbage into a dumpster, B, somebody had something to prove. The girl's braids flew around her head like A, helicopter blades, B, she'd been slapped. The black girl was pinned to the ground like A, an amateur wrestler in a professional fight, B, swimming in a private pool is a threat to national security. The girl's cries sounded like A, the shrieks of children on a playground, B, the shrieks of children being torn from their mothers. The protesting girl was shackled like A, a criminal, B, a runaway slave. Liken it or not.
We'll see if we get through today without weeping.
We promise to leave you on a different note. And in fact, this next poem will sort of shift the mood a little bit. I don't know if you want to talk about your image.
I was just going to say, the images, we kind of, when we came in earlier this week to see the work and kind of figure out how we're going to kind of put these things, we went around and paired up pieces that we thought would work with some of the poems.
Yes.
So, there's no direct reflection one way or the other, but we chose this girl because she was a little sassy.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, and that sassiness is what kind of gets us through in many ways. Sometimes gets us in trouble, but it's not trouble that we deserve, right? This next poem I thought of because it references a couple of young women or youngish women who are also feisty and sassy and getting it done. But the poem is just really very playful. It's an abecedarian in terms of form, which means that the alphabet structures the lines, and it's called Acrobatic. Acrophiliac I'm not, so don't try putting me on the balance beam. The rings, too, are a bad idea. It doesn't help having chalk on my hands. It seems that when you think of me, you think daredevil, some Simone Biles, but that's just ignorant. As everybody else knows, I'm a close to the mat freestyler, just bouncing along to the music from Rocky. You couldn't get me as far off the ground as the uneven bars. Heights make my skin break out and my eyes implode. Since as far back as I can remember, I've avoided jungle gyms. If God meant us to climb, he'd have given all kindergartners tails. You'll never catch me on a ski lift, a ski slope, or a ski. There are just too many ways to die when you start fucking with altitude. Next, you'll be asking me to high dive. Listen, I need my oxygen. If I was any taller, I'd get dizzy parting my hair. Surely you know that mountains are, without question, the greatest mistake Mother Nature made. Give me one good reason to ride a roller coaster. I don't even like mood swings. You can keep the carnival. The flying trapeze is an absolute no-go, even with a safety net underneath. I start dragging my heels at the suggestion of the pole vault. I'd never let go. I'll watch the fabulous Janelle Monáe walk the tightrope all day, but that's not my dance. I'm as xenial as anyone, but my out-of-towners don't get tours of towers. My yoga routine revolves around downward-facing dog. Really, not even Zeus in his swan suit could sweep me off my feet.
With a reference to mythology,
yeah,
Greek mythology, which is a good segue into our next piece.
Yes. Oh, that's right. No, that's right. That's right. The Zeus swan suit is from Leda and the Swan, and this next piece is another ekphrastic poem of mine. Okay, I can't do this. Turning pages.
So this is a piece by Romare Bearden.
Yes.
So say part of a suite.
Yeah.
Black Odyssey.
Black Odysseys. Yeah. I got a chance to see this suite up at Columbia, I believe, during the time that I was writing this book, and just was overwhelmed by that work. And got to thinking about Bearden as someone who had come from North Carolina, along with Nina Simone, who is another one of my favorite North Carolina artists, you might say. I also lived in North Carolina for a time. And what began to emerge was this poem. It's actually the closing poem of the book. It mixes the voices of Circe, who is a sorceress that Odysseus meets on his travels, Odysseus himself, Romare Bearden, and Nina Simone. And these are little fragments that you can imagine as being spoken sometimes by one, sometimes by two, sometimes three, or even all four of them at the same time. If you know, the more you know about their work and their autobiographies and their stories, the more you might be able to make of that. But this is called Circe, Odysseus, Black Odysseys, a remix collage for Romare Bearden and Nina Simone. I am black, but sorceress. I mean trouble. Gonna put long, uneasy miles between me and my home, but it's not a one-way ticket. This here's Circe's domain. Come on in and set a spell. Hey, wanderer, the north's no escape. Just another stop on some lonesome railroad line. Listen, rejection's telling you to improvise. Little girl blue, cotton blue, I do you this way 'cause I can. You bring your beast to my door, you're asking for trouble. Look, when I tell it, the Odyssey is mine. If the gods spew at you their red-eyed fury, you might not ever find home. Harlem swings me a little better. Philadelphia loves me some, brother. Carolina won't stop me from shadowing my passion. Pierce me with your other spear, the one that won't leave me bleeding. You and me, we can pursue things under these wide blue skies that will surely make you forget about home. I got the sea chasing me. What can I do but keep moving? Barbados, Aia, St. Martin. I follow the blue-black keys where they lead. Bebop. Oh, you ain't seen the full power of my mojo, baby. Who's lying to who? Believe me, my wand doubles as a sword. I swear, my voice is honey and venom. Picture Ithaca, I assemble love from cut-up color, canvas, and glue. Daddy, if a year is all you got to give it here. Forever's a big blue illusion anyhow. See all the skulls? Marriage won't outlast freedom, and Liberia ain't the same as liberty. Tell me, how can I trust a woman with a snake for a bracelet? Well, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that sting. Why should I care about Penelope if you don't? If yellow, if red, if orange, if green, if blue. It's true, I'm dying to hear the siren's song. You shape your future from your past. The geometry of don't can be transformed. Troubled women walking. I want to bring forth a people. An outrageous magic shakes me. Everybody knows about Mississippi. Many men destroyed. I'm blue, but I won't be blue always. Never forget my pillow is yours. Red sun shining against a full moon. Night noon's a sign, right? X marks the spot. One last stab at some kind of home. Now go, get back out there and do what you were born to do. And in the midst of this book is a sequence that I call the Topsy suite. And there was something in me that said it needs to represent Topsy not only in words, but also visually. And this was my opportunity to approach Alison, to collaborate again, and to bring her amazing work to this book that I was trying to bring together. And what really made that collaborative possibility come to the surface for me was going back to our experience at Vermont Studio Center. As we left and parted, promising to stay in touch, Alison gifted me with a sketch, a drawing. It was the drawing for the etching that became, right, of this girl with a pearly earring. And her hair, it made me think of Topsy. I was convinced that this was the Topsy that I was writing about. And so I approached Alison.
Yeah. Well, first off, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump back.
Do it.
Because there's so much in that last poem that really, I think, really speaks to the things that I'm interested in as well. Well, first off, Circe and her sirens are, of course, Mami as well. So,
yes.
So they come up in all these different manifestations, and we're constantly being drawn into lured into their lair, more or less, for Penelope. But, so I love that. And then, of course, I wanted to make a mention of Romare Bearden because his work was highly influential. I was just coming into really accepting the fact that I was going to be an artist. As much as I resisted it. And my mother had Romare Bearden's Prayer as a Ritual, really beautiful, beautiful book on the coffee table, and seeing that work really pulled me in because he was kind of cutting masks and intersecting faces, and again it was kind of like this reveal of all these layers, and the work really spoke to me, so I think it's wonderful that he speaks to you as well.
Absolutely.
And then lastly, Nina Simone.
Yes.
And I think kind of what we were discussing a little bit about this book and some of the material, some of the events that have I don't want to say inspired, that's not the right word, but that have driven you or necessitated you to write this work was some pretty dark and angry stuff. And I feel that this show also is having a similar response to those same events. And Nina Simone, right? Can't get any, more fierce or angry than that. And so we were actually having a conversation about, how do you filter these events, and how do you make work that is obviously really angry without it consuming you? And in some ways, I really feel that, part of Nina Simone's tragedy was I think she was consumed by it.
Yes.
I know she had lots of issues, but it just felt like it ate her up because she could not, step down from that rage that she was experiencing, both personally and through her work. And so I think that kind of sets the stage for where we go from here without the words. So so Topsy, Girl with a Pearl Earring, and that's actually out of Uncle Tom's Cabin, where she is accused of stealing someone's earrings. And she has not done it, but she confesses to it. She says, "I's wicked, I's wicked as him." And I don't know how familiar you all are with Uncle Tom's Cabin. I mean, we know two characters out of it, Uncle Tom and Topsy, even though Topsy has a very small role in it. And they have come to be represent stereotypes. Uncle Tom just doing everything he can to kind of like appease the master, and Topsy, who was described, if I may.
Please. Oh, yeah.
Hold on, because I don't want to get it wrong. Her woolly hair was braided in sundry little tails, which stuck out in every direction. There was something odd and goblin-like about her appearance. And so this was written by a woman who saw herself as an abolitionist.
Yep.
And, I think she kind of like opened those doors. And we see it in hindsight. At the time, it was really revolutionary.
Right.
And in hindsight, and you should pipe in because you probably know more about it than I, we see the stereotypes and we see all of the pitfalls of her descriptions of these characters and how they play out. And, how she sees them being saved or resurrected and pulled up from this. And one, of course, is to not have to face the abuse of their masters, and maybe, freedom. Although freedom was always with these quotations, because you could only, hence Liberia, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're free, but you got to go back home, right?
Yes.
Sort of thing.
Free somewhere else.
Free somewhere else, exactly. So any rate, so I like that. I kind of wanted to envision Topsy as sort of owning that, I's wicked. Yeah. And you all better look out, because I'm going to claim all of these things. I'm going to be that goblin. I'm going to take that and push back. So.
Yeah. And I think my Topsy shares that, but also really leans into the mischievous. She's a trickster. Now you see her this way, now you see her another way. And that sort of two-tonguedness, that sort of ability to slide around perception is part of what I think has enabled survival for many of us.
Yes, absolutely.
So I wanted to bring that aspect of her out, and a truth teller aspect.
Right.
I think is something that we share.
I see her as almost like a Puck in the Shakespeare sort of thing, where the sort of observer from aside, but really having to maybe through innocent eyes, maybe because through a child's eyes, has a really astute understanding of the world and what she's up against. Yeah. And in some ways, what she's capable of.
Yeah. So. It was fascinating to me to think about the figure of the girl, because I think a lot of my work has been about Black women, but it seemed not coincidental that the young girl in McKinney, Texas, 14 years old. Even if you think back to antebellum times, we don't think of Topsy in the same breath as Setha from Beloved, Toni Morrison's Beloved, but Setha was 16 at the time of the event, the main events of that novel. So the figure of the girl and what she could do, what her power was important. So I'd like to read, I guess, a little bit from the Topsy suite. How are we doing on time? We're good? Okay, yeah, all right. So this is the opening poem from the section, and it pulls up one of the ways Topsy has survived in our language. Studies in antebellum literature, or topsy-turvy. 19th century novels paint quite the chromatic picture of America. Take The White Whale, say, or The Scarlet Letter. But they aren't all tarred with the same brush. For comic contrast, some give us black humor, national relief projected onto one dark little head, in turn projecting in all directions a local color. Antebellum lit still tinges tongues with shady tints. Our language is loaded, packing heat, a weapon concealed, it seems, only from the blissful. Who'd say, X used to be a small college town, but then 10 years ago it just grew like Topsy. I'd say it grew like kudzu, maybe, or like wildfire, not like Topsy. Note, things that just grew like Topsy. The Middle Passage death toll, the black prison population, the crop of Negro spirituals, like crazy, like a weed, like a motherless child. So
the wrath of Topsy was also kind of a segue coming off of our Greek mythology, and I started looking at her, and I think of the line back from Breach with dread and dreads.
yes.
And I was really interested in kind of Topsy's sundry tales becoming a Medusa, and that even when she's beheaded, her stare will turn you to stones. So we've got our little Gorgon badges.
Yes.
We don't have our shields, but you can wear them on your shoulder and empower you to stop this stuff dead in its tracks.
I love it.
Okay.
Talisman Topsy.
Yeah.
So what joy I had when Alison agreed to create these drawings that you already see the first of. They are paired with a poem that is called From Topsy in Wonderland. And it's a longish poem of excerpts from what I imagine as Topsy taken out of Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel and transplanted into Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. So those of you who know the Lewis Carroll will hopefully appreciate these in particular. I'm going to read maybe 4 of the various excerpts that I have from Topsy in Wonderland, just to give you a sense of it. And you'll see the drawings as they appear. Thank you again. It's just, so from Topsy in Wonderland. What are you? Said the captain of industry. This was not an encouraging opening for a conversation. Topsy replied gaily, I hardly know, sir, presently. I knowed who I was when I got up on my own continent this morning, but looks around the Planta station and the rest of the United States. I must have been changed several times since then. Yours wasn't a really good school, said the mocking person. I took the different branches of arithmetic, ambition, distraction, uglification, and derision. I never did hear of uglification, Topsy ventured to say. What'd that be? Never heard of uglifying, he said. You know what to beautify is, I suppose. Yeah, said Topsy doubtfully. It mean to make something whiter? Well then, said the mocking person, if you don't know what to uglify is, you are a savage. Oh, I have to read this one, I'm sorry. This one goes well with the Golden Fleece. One thing was certain, that the white girl had had nothing to do with it. It was the black girl's fault entirely. For little Eva had been having her sins washed away for the last 300 or 400 years. And having begun as an apple tart thief thousands of years back, she was cleaning up pretty well considering. So you see that she couldn't have had any hand in the contemporary mischief. I should experience freedom far better, said Topsy to herself, if I could get to the mountaintop. And here's a path that leads directly to it. At least, no, it doesn't do that, after going a few yards along the path and turning several sharp corners. But I suppose it will get me free at last. But how curiously it twists. It's more like gerrymandering than meandering. Well, this turn goes to the mountaintop, I suppose. No, it doesn't. This goes back directly to the big house. Well, then, I'll try another way. And so she did, wandering up and down, trying tactic after tactic, but always coming back to the big house, do what she would. Indeed, once, when Topsy turned a corner rather more quickly than usual, she ran against it before she could stop herself. I'm not going in again. I know I should have to go back through the looking glass, back into the old box, and there'd be an end of all my efforts to escape. So, resolutely turning her back upon the big house, Topsy set out once more through the system, determined to keep right on till she got to the mountaintop. For a few years, all went on well, and she was just saying, I really shall do it this time, when the path gave a sudden twist and the system shook itself, and the next moment she found herself actually walking in through the big house door. Oh, fuck the bullshit, Topsy cried. I never saw such a house for getting in the way. Never. However, there was the mountaintop in full sight, so there was nothing to be done but start again. And this last section. Is I addressing the missus? Topsy began. Well, yes, if you call that addressing, the mistress said. It isn't my notion of the thing at all. I've been addressing myself for the past 2 hours. It would have been all the better, it seemed to Topsy, if she had got someone else to dress her. She was so dreadfully untidy and crooked. Missus, you really seems to need a maid. I'm sure I'll take you with pleasure, the mistress said. 200 hours a week and freedom every other day. Topsy laughed nervously. I don't want you to take me. I want my freedom today. You can't have it just because you want it, the mistress said. The rule is freedom tomorrow and freedom yesterday, but never freedom today. Topsy objected. It's sometime got to come to freedom now.
To see the manuscript for Alice's Adventures Underground prior to it being Wonderland. But this was one of the images that I kind of riffed off, which was, of course, her cot, when she ate too much of one thing, couldn't fit in her box anymore. So that was that. So yeah, it was kind of fun to play with.
Fitting into the page.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Playing off of, pulling off of these same resources, but kind of having the freedom to kind of explore things on our own and see how they fall side by side, which is really, really exciting. And I think, you mentioned it in a couple of works in terms of, and I think just the nature of her work in and of itself is this play with language. And I think, of course, Lewis Carroll was pretty phenomenal in that, and kind of, the absurd and talking about very real and poignant issues through these sort of absurdist sort of scenarios.
And they show up again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it kind of brings me to talk a little bit about these pieces. And I'm going to again read this so I don't get it wrong. Because I was thinking, I think as poets and as artists, we often kind of have to reimagine things. And so I was really intrigued by Audre Lorde's words, for the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us to temporarily beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. And I think you know, we talk about how art and poetry and all of these things can affect what we're experiencing, can somehow. And so basically that's what these girls have all done, is taken up the master's tools, and they're have tethered cotton balls to their braids, and they're coming out through the fields. They're sneaking up on you. This is like high cotton for some folks means you got it easy. High cotton for them means you can sneak up on you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so all of these, each figure represents a different crop. So we have sugar with a machete. We have indigo. These are kind of the 5 main slave crops in the United States. We've got cotton with her veil, rice with her sickle, and tobacco with her tobacco knife. So I just wanted to introduce them to you.
Oh, they're beautiful. It's...
Two more things for you all.
Yeah, and very shorter poems. You know, just being surrounded by these figures, it does change the way I feel in my body, and I love the idea that art can penetrate the kinds of shells that we put around ourselves, and sometimes, you know, penetrate not just the feelings, but change minds. And when we talk about changing the world, that's really what we're talking about. Changing minds in a way that changes what we do. This next poem is dedicated to Sandra Bland, and hopefully that is all the introduction that it needs. I mean, I guess one more thing in terms of how Stowe creates Topsy. She creates her as a figure who I don't recognize. You know, I don't recognize my childhood in that girl who, when asked, you know, who made you, in the sense of the Catholic or Christian catechism, who made you? She says, I don't know, I just grew. And that's where that sort of phrase comes from. I felt like if Stowe wanted to possess Topsy, that I would reimagine Topsy as a familiar figure in a different light. Topsy talks about her role. I don't mean to get into their heads, I just go. It's like I'm possessed too, as if my mind and body aren't my own. Anyhow, it's all in the timing. If I desert a girl too soon, she'll end up 30 before she's 13, dragging around a burden big as a church at an age when some young women ain't weighing nothing heavier than which purple they want for their pedicure. But if I hold a sister too long, not a thing on earth can tether her. Now, this Sandra was anything but bland. I was hooked. I do like to ride a tongue that's limber, that can keep up with the flash of my spirit. She had a dancing mouth, the kind that could give you warm, such warmth, or just as easily give you hot if called for. I know where I'm welcome. I was still cutting capers behind her smile the week she died. I overstayed. In Texas, parts of Chicago too, pickaninny droll don't come in women's sizes. You can set whatever tone you want with a pair of baby blues, but when I roll black women's brown eyes, they always turn into sapphires.
And so this piece, Topsy and the Golden Fleece, is really kind of one of the pieces that started out this series for me. And it harkens back to when poor little Eva is on her deathbed. And I think, it's interesting because Eva is basically, Topsy is the negative of Eva. That Eva's got these gold ringlets, and she's beautiful, she's light, she's fairness, she is, godliness. And, her role in the book is basically to bring God to Topsy and cure her of her savage self, and cure her of her mischievous ways and her darkness and all these things. And upon her deathbed, she's doling out threads of her golden hair as to represent, here I'm giving you Christ, he's going to save you. And so I wanted to imagine Topsy saying, like, hell no, I am taking the entire scalp You know, she said, this is where your power lies, in this golden, beautiful hair. I'm claiming it. And so that's what Topsy and the Golden Fleece is.
Love it.
So,
we're at the
this brings us to our current collaboration.
yeah.
And we're really excited about this. We're working with Leslie Robertson, who is an artist and printmaker and runs the Odyssey Lab Press and also has her own press. And so we are collaborating on a broadside, which this is a really early rendition, a little mock-up of it. And I actually have the block here today to kind of show you all. This is the teaser. So this is the block.
Yeah.
And Evie will read her beautiful poem.
Yeah. The poem comes from the book, just before the final section, where I try to raise up art as a way to break some of these cycles. And Alison saw it as a great companion for this drawing of Topsy with her towering crown of cotton. Stop, meet with me here, weapons at rest, on this stage of reciprocal dreaming. You imagine you hear my desperate breathing, and I, your eardrum, a small heart beating.
Thank you both so much. So, yes, thank you. So I'd like to open up for questions. If anybody from the audience has any questions for Alison and Evie. Okay, right back here.
So I really get the feeling of a third entity being created by your collaboration. Do you feel that too?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, in each case, a third thing appears rather than four things, right? There's.
Yeah. And I think there's something really exciting about it. Kind of approach a collaboration like a free fall in a sort of way that you put stuff out there and they come together and then they do become something kind of independent of either of us.
Yes. Yeah. The conversation sort of takes shape in mid-fall, like you're saying. Yeah.
I asked that question from your remark, I think, Alison, saying that you wanted it to be more than just like an illustrator's positioning,
Absolutely. I mean, we've had conversations about what the word illustration means in relation to text and for an artist, and I keep really policing my circle of readers and friends from saying, she illustrated your book. It's like, no, she didn't illustrate it, no. We were both thinking about Topsy, and and she has graced these pages with her work. But I've had people argue that illustration is a word that has only come to be slightly dismissive in the contemporary moment. Yeah, and that maybe I like to think that you illuminated Topsy. Right.
Right before you said that, I thought, first of all, here's two beautiful, strong warrior female artists coming together to combine, their art. And then I thought they probably are beginning to finish each other's sentences. But the thing that I want to ask you is, does your art, both of you, help you reconcile the political drama that's going on today? Is that a way of you to have some catharsis around this crap? Sorry.
For me, I always struggle with whether catharsis means that we've moved to some other place. It's sort of ongoing. So catharsis may be too final a term, but I tend to go to the word process. It helps me process that, maybe to add art to the world at the same rate or a faster rate than some of these other things are being brought into our space creates a kind of balance, or lets me also, very importantly, think through what's happening and what is my response, or what could be my responses. Yeah. What about you?
Definitely. I mean, it's a means to keep these events from consuming us, I think, in some ways. I mean, there's been periods in my life where I think actually when I had my son Kyle, I just could not watch the news. And I think that was around the time where people were black men were being torched in Florida and dragged from the backs of pickup trucks till they were beheaded. And it was just like, okay, I've got to shut this door. But that doesn't help either, because then all these things that are going on are, still going on. And, it kind of feels like this is all for some folks this is news, but for many this is just the same old, and it's just that we're now, it's more visible through media and whatnot, but it's not new news. But yeah, I think, it's just a way to kind of feel like somehow, not so much affecting it, but just somehow, keeping yourself together. So in that way, yes.
I just want to add to that. In the 70s, many of us marched against Vietnam. We started the women's movement. We worked to make abortion safe and legal. And I kind of see your work as kind of fulfilling the same thing, is speaking out. It's like you used to say, hear us. We want to be heard. And I see that coming from your work as well.
Well, part of what these little girls are all about is to see really, I would say kids, my kids' generation, but even really small children. I've been to so many marches with toddlers with dump Trump. They have their dump truck painted on the thing. It's just like, and I think how these girls came about was listening to the audio from that was taped by Philando Castile's girlfriend after he was murdered in their car while her and her 4-year-old daughter were in the seat. And you can hear her daughter in the background saying, please don't let you get shooted, Mama. Please don't let you get shooted. And you wonder who these little girls will grow up to be and what they've experienced, whether it's on the media. Many of them have experienced it for years just in their front lawn, on their streets, in their neighborhoods. And to really think, and that's why I imagine them not being totally traumatized by this, although I'm sure they are, but also to somehow wish upon them to be able to turn that topsy-turvy. Yes. and to kind of create these strong, determined young girls, young boys, young adults to really, be not more forthright. I think we really did a good job, my mother's generation and I think our generation. But, I think there are moments in recent history where I think there was a lot of complacency, and that, it is time to take up arms again. And so, that's
Thank you guys again. And if you would like to buy a book and have it signed, we are staging that upstairs, so I invite everybody to head on up. Thank you.